So thank you, everybody. I'm a bit overwhelmed, actually, now that I've seen you all standing together. There's some seats at the front if anybody wants to have a seat. I know everybody likes to sit at the back or stand at the back. But yeah, thank you so much for coming along tonight. It's been about a year since I decided I was going to write a book. And it's actually Sophie, wherever Sophie is. It's over there. It's kind of her fault because I was listening to her podcast. And people had kept telling me to write a book. And I kept going, I haven't got time to write a book. And then she was interviewing somebody on Beyond the Bio podcast and said their first book was a little book. And I was literally driving and I went, oh, I could do that. I could write a little book. And then within seconds, a little book of leadership lessons kind of came into my head. So thanks to Rosaria, who's also here, I kind of thought, who can I get to help me write? Rosaria is a fantastic writing coach if anybody wants to write, and I know I need accountability. So I said to Rosaria, I need you to hold me accountable. And every week, almost, I made sure I sent her something and then we would discuss it. And about 4.5 months later, the draft of this was born. And there's loads of other people that I have thanked in the book who have read it for me and given fantastic feedback, and I've changed and amended it on the basis of that. So it's lovely to have you all here and people who are very, very important to me here. So thank you. So Michelle, talking to people who are important. Michelle's got water. I've got tea, of course, because it's my thing. Is going to interview me.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. And can I just say, it is an honour to do this interview with you tonight. I know how much work you've delivered over the years and all the impact that you've created, and you're connected with people in this room through various things that you do. And it's interesting, isn't it, when we see business books on the shelf. I don't know about everybody else in the room, but I always wonder who that person is. Who's the person behind the book? And I wonder if they're credible. And Steph has got credibility in the bucket loads. So I'm going to have to say this in a few breaths, but strap in. Who is Steph as a leader? She's a mum, a daughter, a partner, a sister, and a really good friend. She's the CEO of St Oswald's and the director at the Chamber of Commerce. She's the chair of Tyneside Cinema, and she's a Girl Guide leader. She's chair of Elliott Smith Dance and a member of the Chartered Management Institute Women's Committee. I was worried I wasn't going to get that all out. Founder and host of Black All Year podcast, an excellent dance teacher, and an incredible performer herself. Steph's had numerous leadership roles over the health, social and community sector over a number of years, shall we say.
1 or 2.
She's an award-winning leader, and those awards are very deserving. I think what a lot of people see the titles, but they don't see what goes on behind those titles. Steph is super lovely, but she's incredibly fierce as well. And she's also a fan leader of the cheesiest Channel 5 style Christmas films.
I was actually watching one last night.
It's due. So obviously the book has been an aspiration of yourselves. Lots of people, had suggested it. And I've been fortunate to read the book ahead of its launch. It's honest, it's personable, it's wonderfully vulnerable. And it's a complete contrast to business books that are out there on the market. So if you always think, when you're looking at professional books, for your own learning, these aren't for me, it doesn't work for me. Steph's book is definitely up there, so you need to get one purchased. One thing with the book, I won't give it too much away, but there's a bit of a theme, and it's a brilliant theme, and it relaxes you into the book really, really well. But with the wealth of experience that you've got, Steph, and you've got many feathers in your cap, it must have been challenging to know where to begin. And I know you've just said that you were listening, obviously, to podcasts, and that idea of a little book, sort of sparked your, I can do it, but I know you've got volumes and volumes of experience. So how challenging was it, once you consciously committed to delivering a little book of leadership level lessons?
Well, it kind of was and it wasn't, because I wanted stories that were going to be fairly universal. The first thing that I knew I had to put in there was about imposter phenomena, because it's something that I've talked about a lot, I've coached people about. It's kind of my specialist subject. Unfortunately, it's affected a big part of my life. So I knew that had to be in there. And actually, the chapters kind of flowed from there. There were some that I thought I was going to write about, and I didn't. I just kind of got to the point where I thought, actually, it's not flowing. And Rosaria and I talked about, if it's not flowing, just stop and move on, and maybe come back to it. So there was some it just wasn't flowing at all, and it would have been really forced for me to write about it. And then actually, even in the process of writing the book, other things would happen, and I'd go, oh, yeah, actually, that's an example of this, and I haven't got that in there. So there's at least one chapter that wasn't in the original list that I thought, no, actually, that needs to be in there, because this happens quite a bit. So.
Great. The book opens with the reasons behind the book, which is a good base, and it moves into what leadership is. And I'm sure a lot of us have wondered that question over the years, especially when you're in a leadership role, and you question yourself, like, am I a leader? Obviously, your interpretation of leadership is very human-centered, and again, that is a complete contrast to what I certainly was led to believe growing up, in terms of what a leader is and what they look like and who they are and how they deliver themselves. And as we move into the book, chapter 2, You Are Enough, that marks your personal journey and experiences into leadership. And you experienced quite a significant health issue through those experiences, and the development, like you've just mentioned, of the psychological phenomenon imposter syndrome. At the start of the chapter, you refer to a photograph, and then that sets us away. Would you mind reading that section with the audience to give them an idea of what I'm talking about?
Okay. I told them. Okay, so I felt like I didn't belong in most situations. I felt like people were tolerating my presence rather than welcoming it, and I believed I wasn't enough at 12. This continued throughout my teenage years. It followed me into young adulthood and was there when I was a mother, a leader, and a coach. It didn't just remain, though, it grew. It fed off my natural teenage insecurities. It was nourished by my young adult relationships and experiences. It thrived on the uncertainties that come when you are a parent, leading your first team, supporting others. I permitted imposter phenomena to inform and craft my life. I'm going to put my specs on. I was just saying, I either need them or I don't. I do need them. As a young person, I wanted to be a performer, a triple threat, actor, singer, and dancer. But by my mid-teens, I was telling myself why I wasn't going to make it. At the time, there were very few successful black actors, and the female black actors who made it were all tall, slim, and gorgeous. At 5'5", I wasn't tall. At 8.5 stone, 119 pounds, I was described as a big girl at dancing. And I certainly wasn't sought out by the good-looking lads at school, so I thought I was probably not gorgeous either. So even though I went to university to study performance art, I didn't pursue my dream in a consistent, persistent way, and I dropped out after 2 years. I believed I wasn't a good enough performer and didn't look the right way to get to where I wanted to be. Professionally, over the years, I let imposter phenomenon prevent me from applying for jobs, asking for help, saying that my workload was excessive, asking for more pay, taking credit for my work. I permitted it to push me to work excessive hours, to take on additional responsibilities without any recognition in terms of pay or seniority, to sacrifice time with family and friends, to push myself to the brink of depression and to illness. I actually had a brain hemorrhage. Yes, I was ill because I felt I wasn't good enough and I was constantly afraid of being found out as an imposter. In the summer of 2016, I was really stressed. I was running my own business alongside running a not-for-profit, parenting, dealing with a controlling and needy boyfriend, and 100 other things. I had a few days off and came down with a mystery illness. I was vomiting and felt weak. This wasn't unusual for me as, because I worked on the edge all the time, whenever I stopped for a holiday, I was hit by some form of illness. As usual, I recovered after a few days. A month later, I suddenly developed thunderclap headaches over a 24-hour period, then kind of recovered. A week later, I was in hospital, having had a brain hemorrhage. It was caused when, as the Swiss cheese safety theory would say, all the holes lined up. I'd had a viral infection, which in rare cases can lead to a condition where the blood vessels in the brain can constrict, and in rare cases that can lead to a brain hemorrhage. I was one of those rare cases.
I can see Yaz is crying at the front. And
it was a tough time, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's the thing. With imposter syndrome is what many people label it as, and it is a psychological phenomena. But it's not classed as a condition, but you had a very physical reaction to it. And it must have been petrifying for you all. But even after the brain hemorrhage, you didn't stop.
Oh, no.
You know, and it was some time after, when you were teetering on the edge of a mental health crisis, that you had that realization that you needed to do something. You needed to overcome this imposter phenomena. Was it something in particular? If the brain hemorrhage didn't trigger it, you know, was it something in particular that just one day where you like, I've got to deal with this, I've got to get over this because it's having this physical effect on me? Or was it a multitude of experiences?
It was probably a bit of a combination, if I'm honest. So I had the brain hemorrhage, and then it was because I still had this thing tell me I wasn't good enough. It was, well, I've just got to get on with it, and I've got to prove everybody that I've had a brain hemorrhage, but I'm still good enough. And I had to just push on and push through. And I was then asked to do something on top of the job, and I was trying to run my business and kind of run Health Watch, and it was really, really challenging. And I can actually remember sitting waiting for Yasmin to come out of I think it was rugby or something in Blythe, and I had somebody on the phone talking to me and saying, oh, and have you done this, and have you done that, and have you done the other? And I just went, I can't. And I just kept saying, I can't, and then I hung up. And that was when I thought, Steph, if you don't do this, you are going to die, and you need to be there. Mm-hmm. You need to take care of Yaz. So that was my point of going, I really need to deal with this, and I need to address it. And I won't say it was easy, because it wasn't. And I still do stuff even now to keep going and to keep well. So, you know, I've got a book coming out. That's the time when it would really start. So I've been working a lot over the last few weeks to kind of fill up my bank so that I don't have it and it doesn't attack me. And I recognize it as soon as it starts to shout up, and I can just muzzle it again and put it back in its box and all that type of thing. So yeah, it was really, really difficult, but I think I was very lucky that I caught it when I did. Mm-hmm. I had some amazing people around me who helped me through that and helped me really change my way of looking at things and get mentally well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just kind of have to keep remembering that when I do all of the stuff that I do, I have to just keep remembering, you need to find time for yourself, you need time to relax, you need time to do the stuff that fills you up, like dance teaching, and all of that really. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. You say you're lucky. We're lucky as well, you know, that you did take that step, you had that realization, and you're able to share the lessons with us today. So I'm grateful for that. You move on through the chapter, and Steph shares the mechanisms that she used to try and overcome imposter syndrome. And while she was working through those strategies, you had a bit of a light bulb moment. And I've got to say, when I read this light bulb moment in the book, it was like somebody had thrown cold water over myself as well. And it was around the fact that you'd started to identify that there wasn't just this imposter voice going on. There was actually an intuition voice there as well. And that you would be in certain situation at times, and it wasn't the imposter telling you you didn't belong and you weren't good enough. It was actually the intuition from the social behaviours and the signals of what was going on around you. And that feeling of not belonging was very much the voices that were surrounding you. At the moment of that realisation, and you started to obviously notice when it was your voice in your head or when it was what was going on in the room, what was the balance? Do you know, was it more you, or was it these external voices?
I think by the time I came to the realisation, it was more the external, because I had managed the internal imposter voice. And I think what I would say is that the reason I had imposter phenomena was largely because of those external factors. So they'd kind of nourished it in the first place. So things like, you know, growing up in Newcastle, so Fred, you'll know that, you know, you grow up black in Newcastle in the 70s. There were plenty of people telling us we didn't belong. And even if they weren't saying it directly to our face, they were showing it in the way they behaved. And unfortunately, it still happens today. Being a woman who was in leadership, there were plenty of people telling me that I didn't belong. So actually, I had taken that as, it was almost subliminal, I think, that then I was thinking, oh, well, I don't belong and I don't fit in and I look different and I feel different and I think differently. And therefore, I'm wrong. So when I kind of was working through it and suddenly realised that, hang on, this isn't necessarily about me. Some of it is, and some of it I've taken from the environment and internalised and things. But actually, quite a bit of it is stuff that's messages that I'm picking on externally. That was really powerful for me, because it's that thing of, well, if it's me, I do one bit of work and I kind of address that and deal with it. But if it's not me, it's a whole different ball game, and I've got a whole different lot of work to do. And I need to really change that, because I don't want any of our children or grandchildren to be in that same position. But in some ways, it's harder and it's easier, because it's not me going mad. I remember the first time I spoke about imposter syndrome at a chamber event, and a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, "Thank you so much. I didn't know this was a thing. I thought I was going mad." Mm-hmm. And I think so many of us think that until we realise it's a thing. And then it's used almost as a weapon against us. People will go, "You've got imposter syndrome. You want to sort that thing out." And no, we don't, because actually a lot of the time we're picking up on the messages around us. And I would say that's why women have it a lot. That's why people who are black and ethnically minoritized have it a lot. But actually, I also think that's why men do, and particularly male leaders, because men are told, this is what a man looks like, this is how they behave, this is what a male leader looks like. And they don't look or behave like that. So then they go, oh, hang on, I'm not like what I'm being told I'm supposed to be, and therefore I must be wrong, I don't belong. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it affects us all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's important, isn't it, that we're able to distance ourselves from those voices and be able to question them, you know, and see if there's any truth behind them, to be able to then be an advocate, you know, and trying to undo that and it's brazen judgment, isn't it? And I'm sure as many people in the room have gone through similar experiences as well. So obviously we move on from that chapter, which for you, obviously overcoming imposter syndrome allowed you really to step into yourself as a leader. I mean, the next chapter, dispelling the busyness myth. This chapter is brilliant. I am now using it to avoid cleaning because I've got. But Steph tells me I can. But we deep dive then into who we surround ourselves with, and obviously judging by the room tonight, you're surrounded by a lot of great people now, but that wasn't always the case. And you share that obviously, when you surround yourself with people that aren't positive, they're still going to be influencing who you are, what you do, how you think, what actions you deliver and what you believe. The beginning, you share those negative voices, so it'd be great if you could share some of those experiences with the room.
I will say some of the positive voices are in the book and are in the room as well, but yeah, I'll share the negative ones. So, okay. Specs again. Oh, age, isn't it brilliant? Actually, yes, it is, because I'm still here. Right, okay, so I began to realise just how close to an emotional breakdown I was. I had focused on my physical health, but ignored my mental well-being. When I look back on the years leading up to that time, I see that I had surrounded myself with some negative people and voices. Person 1. Many years earlier, when I was on the NHS management training scheme, the scheme leaders told us we should be reading the broadsheet newspapers to ensure that we were well informed on current affairs, and that would make us better NHS leaders. I told myself that I didn't have time to read the papers. I probably didn't because I was intent on being busy all the time. But the next best thing was listening to the Radio 4 Today programme on the way to work each morning. That progressed to me listening to Radio 4 all the time when I was in the car. For anyone who doesn't know, Radio 4 is a talk-only radio station provided by the BBC. It tends to be very middle class in its output and covers a huge range of topics from news and current affairs to nature and science, the arts, comedy and the shipping forecast. I consumed an average of 4 to 6 hours of radio a day, and a large part of this was news and current affairs. I don't know if you've noticed, but the bulk of news programming is, and always has been, fairly negative. Happy events seldom make the news. Therefore, I was consuming large amounts of negative news on a daily basis. Person 2. At the time, my guilty pleasure was watching a certain soap opera. I would record the omnibus edition and watch it in bed on a Sunday morning before my daughter got up. I believed it helped me relax, escaping to a fantasy part of the UK full of rolling hills and sheep. However, soap operas are not renowned for their lack of drama, and often this is drawn from storylines that cause heartache and misery. So once a week, I was consuming a couple of hours of betrayal, hardship and sorrow with a sprinkling of humour and romance. Person 3. I was working alongside NHS and social care colleagues. The public sector has always been a challenging place to work, and the NHS in particular is under a huge amount of public and governmental scrutiny. Funding cuts were biting across the public sector, and it was starting to show. Everyone was overworked and frustrated that the changes they wanted to make were impossible or extremely challenging. Add to this the impact of the government's austerity policy on many of the people we were working with, those with the least in our society who needed the most support, and it created a prevailing atmosphere of conflict and fruitlessness. My working day often experienced a snowball effect. One person would start with a small trouble, worry or woe, which would be added to by the people around them and start to gain momentum, picking up concerns along the way, and before you knew it, you'd have a huge snowball of misery that would take up all the space. Person 4. I had a colleague at work who I suspected was going through some emotional challenges. They'd gone from being a very supportive and warm individual to someone who was highly critical of colleagues and circumstances. They sowed division and mistrust, encouraging others to doubt each other and fueling arguments. The fun, welcoming environment that we'd created started to crumble, and as the boss, I was the person that everyone quite rightly ran to with their woes. Person 5. After my relationship ended, we tried to maintain our friendship. There were lots of issues with that relationship that I won't go into here, apart from saying that his behaviours and mental state made him difficult to be around. It was my choice to end the relationship, and as a result, each of our post-breakup conversations became emotionally charged and sorrowful. So my 5 people were actually more like 5 situations or experiences that I lived daily. I was surrounded by negativity, sorrow, and pessimism.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm all right now.
It's interesting though. It's 5 people, but a few of them weren't actually people. There were activities that you were undertaking, believing you were doing the right thing. So it's obviously it's that thought process, isn't it, around everything that we're doing. And in today, that's really difficult because we are absolutely bombarded with influences from everywhere we go. Do you know, we're attached to our phones, and there's a magnitude of information and communication coming through that. You know, life is busy, it's fast, everybody's got something to say. Now, I know you're also a coach and a mentor, and I'm interested to understand when you're coaching and mentoring leaders, especially young up-and-coming leaders, how you're helping them to navigate like the progressively overstimulating world that we live in today.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge that, you know, I love social media. As you've probably noticed over the last couple of weeks, I've posted about the book once or twice, buy the book. But yeah, so I really love social media, and actually I've got an awful lot of it. I've made connections. Some of you in the room I've made through social media. But there's something for me about when I'm working with people about saying you need to have something. So I have things that mean a lot to me. Cup of tea. I love my cup of tea in the morning. That's an anchor point for me. Dancing is such a release, and that's really important. My friends, my family, they're really important. And to be able to make sure that you balance it a little bit. So I stopped watching the news. I still don't watch the news. I very, very rarely will watch it. And actually, I think the last time that I watched it with Rob, I kind of went, I've got to get out of here. I just can't. And that was after about 5 minutes. So really helping people to understand that there are things that nourish you and there are things that kind of drain you, and identifying what the drains are. And if you have to be around them, limiting yourself in how often you're exposed to them. But everybody's different. I say this at the hospice all the time, you know, that we have sound baths at the hospice, which some staff absolutely love. I can't think of anything I dislike more. But I have a colleague who can't be here tonight, who I would get up and have a dance. If I said to him, come on, let's have a dance, he would probably jump out a window. You know, and so it's all about people and different things. And when I'm coaching, it's very much about what's right for that individual, and not me trying to put what I believe and what works for me onto them. It's about helping them to recognise what are their stimulants and what are their drains.
Yeah, I'm sat thinking, what are my stimulants and drains?
You also be
how
your
does
family
it?
partly.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does
Both.
it work with being a mum? How can you put that?
Well, I bet knowing your kids, I bet you that they're both stimulant and drain at times, but mainly stimulants.
Yes, yours. Exactly. So surrounding yourself with the right voices, and that's everything in life, not just people. You go on to share, obviously, you've had your 5 negative, you go on to share the positive voices within the book. I've got to shout out Auntie Mavis, you know, and again, it's leaders that don't look like leaders.
So Auntie Mavis is, she's the senior principal at the dance school where I teach, and she got me back into dancing by saying that she was teaching some more mature ladies ballet these days. I thought it was very tactfully put, and she's just an amazing human. She really is. And she couldn't be here tonight because she's on a plane. But yeah, she's just incredible and has touched so many people's lives. So.
And that's the beauty about that section of the book. You know, it really evokes that question around a leader can be anybody. You know, there's no set image. You know, what we've been led to believe over the years isn't true. You then move on to people that you admired, but there was a but. things went, the seemed, but that led to a really valuable lesson in understanding that we aren't perfect. And as humans, we make mistakes. And actually seeing somebody that we admire, especially one of the people you mentioned in the book who fell from quite a high pedestal, make mistakes, is a really valuable lesson, for us all. But with all that said and done, within surrounding yourself with positive voices and people you can learn from, you have to say goodbye to those negative voices in relationships. Now, that must be incredibly emotionally challenging. How did you navigate those goodbyes?
When it came to people, I had a number of, so some you can just let drift. It's kind of like, you just get in touch with them slightly less frequently. And there were a couple where it was like, well, I won't get in touch with you, and I'll wait and see if you contact me. And oh, you didn't, what a surprise, because I'm the one that did all the work. So I just some it was quite simple, you let drift. Some, though, I had to be really, really clear with, no, I'm really sorry, and this is why. And I think it helps when you are quite busy, because there's always things that you can be doing to keep you busy. I think the most difficult one was that relationship that I was in, and making that decision to end it, and to actually not just end the relationship, but to end contact, because I felt very responsible for that for some bizarre reason, and I felt very responsible for their well-being and their mental well-being, but actually being around just to keep them mentally well was really damaging to me, and I'd had enough of it, if I'm honest. So it was a case of, no, I'm not doing this anymore, and please don't contact me anymore, and if you do, I'm just not going to respond. So yeah, cutting off contact is never easy. Some people make it easier because what they do is so disgusting that you just go, you know what, no, I've got no feelings for you whatsoever anymore. But the best ones are the ones that you just let drift. Yeah. Chicken's way out.
It is. It was funny, somebody mentioned earlier on that it's all, I can't remember who it was in the room, that it's all about relationships, your relationship with everything. And that theme comes all the way throughout the book. It's brilliant, by the way, that you've had the strength, to close the door on those negative relationships and experiences as well.
I'm sorry, there was something you said earlier that I wanted to just pick up on as well, because to me that thing about nobody's perfect and that fall from grace was really important for me, to put my mistakes and my flaws in the book, because I really worry sometimes that people, if you look at me, you look at the social media me, and you would go, oh, look at Steph, wow. So actually I want people to know I've got weeds in the garden, and that I don't tidy the house, and well, we haven't actually, because we're putting hot water and salt on the weeds in the garden, but I want people to know that there are lots of things I don't do, and actually if I focused on just 2 things, I'd do them a lot better, because I don't ever want anybody to put me on a pedestal and go, oh wow, Steph's amazing, because I'm not bad, I'm really good at some stuff, but I'm nowhere near perfect. So yeah,
I don't know who came up with this idea of perfect. I think it's a word that we need to sort of slowly remove from society.
The only thing that's perfect is 70% dark chocolate.
So moving on, you do continue to talk about voices, and listening to difficult voices was one of the chapters. But chapter 7, I've got to say, this was a standout chapter for me. Not every table feeds you. And yeah, when I had the same reaction, yeah. And it's so true. But it's a chapter about the stark reality of equality, diversity, and inclusion. And we often talk about a seat at the table, but the reality of what that table gives you is something completely different, and very relevant for the moment in time that we're living through at the moment as well. Could you please share your personal experience?
This is the one that the lawyers had to see. Okay, right. Okay. I must admit that when Michelle told me which bit she wanted me to read, this has been the hardest. So, on my first proper day on the job, at my first board meeting, I believed I contributed well to the first part of the meeting, bringing insights that my range of work experience had allowed me to gain. Everything seemed to be going well. Then we came to the second part of the board meeting. We were observed by a number of people, including members of the press. The board chair welcomed everyone to the meeting, then introduced me, saying something like, "As you may notice, we have a new person around the table, Steph Edusei, who is joining us as a non-executive director. As you can see, she is a person of colour. Pink." And they laughed. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. This was an observed board meeting. The press was there. What should I do? Should I challenge them on the inappropriateness of their comment? Their chuckle obviously showed me that they thought it was a good joke. My top and my coat on the back of my chair were both pink. But I felt singled out, and not in a good way. I felt like they'd both highlighted and negated my ethnicity. I felt othered, marginalised, and I did what so many people do in a similar situation where they are in the minority and an authority figure of the majority says or does something that others them under the guise of the joke. I gave an embarrassed laugh. For the next 5 minutes or so, it felt like longer. My mind continued in a whirlwind of, what should I do? What should I say? This is not on. I'm an advocate for equity and inclusion, and I'm accepting this. People are watching. I'm so embarrassed. Eventually, I gave myself a talking to and told myself to focus or I'd add no value to the meeting. I resolved to mention it to the chair at another time, but events overtook me and I bumped into them shortly after at a large social event. As we passed, they raised what they said and said that they thought it was a rather good joke. Again, I gave an embarrassed laugh and they moved on. I'm ashamed that I never challenged them on it.
I don't know if anybody else felt like the anger rising up in them. It's a difficult section to read. And I think probably a lot of us in the room will have been in similar situations where somebody said something and we dare not challenge them on it. And gone so far as doing that silly little jokey laugh to go along with it when it's not funny. It's a difficult, obviously, experience, especially because you're in a room full of people that know how much you advocate, for underrepresented individuals and groups. And that feeling of shame, obviously, it still sits with you today, and it was obviously in that moment, it was very, very strong. But where was it rooted? Where does it sit today? Why is it still there today? And how does it play a part in how you deliver your actions today?
Yeah, I'm still cross that I didn't get a chance to challenge it directly. I don't think this person is going to read the book. And even if they did, I don't think they're self-aware enough to recognise themselves in it. But I am still cross that I didn't, but actually I forgive myself for not challenging them. It's really interesting because nobody else challenged it. So there was a room full of people there, and people I spoke to afterwards said, oh, that was a bit off, but not one of them challenged it. And they were in a position of power then compared to me. And actually, I've more recently had a situation where I actually challenged something. And because there were a group of us who were all had a common characteristic, for want of a better word, we felt empowered to challenge back because we weren't the only one that was there. So I am angry. I'm angry that that person will still get recognition and accolades, because there's other stuff in the chapter about the climate that they and others kind of fostered, and that's not being challenged at all. But actually, for me personally, it was a big learning experience, and that thing of actually, there's a lot that happened in that where, on reflection, and writing the book was really, really helpful. I didn't think enough before I went into that situation in the first place. I was flattered. I was honoured to be there. I was grateful to be there. And had I actually thought about it before I went into that situation, I would have known. I would have known that was the kind of experience I was going to have. I mean, I've just seen James Cass, and we've had a long discussion about recruiting for boards and that type of thing, and about how important it is that it's not just getting the right candidate, it's making sure that the organisation has done its work as well to receive those candidates in. And quite often they don't do that. They just sit and they go, oh, well, we want somebody, we want some women. I think the banking, it's James's example. We want some women on the board, let's get some women in. And then they don't think about what being a woman means. When I was at the ambulance service many years ago, there was an ambulance station that the women's changing room was a converted cupboard, because at no point when that ambulance station was being built did they even consider that a paramedic could be a woman. And it was an afterthought. It was like, oh, hang on a second, we've got some women, we better put a toilet and a locker in a cupboard. So yeah, doing that preparation. So yeah, I still I'm cross with myself for not doing it, but I'm not beating myself up about it. I've kind of forgiven myself. If I went back into that situation, I'd love to say I would do it differently, but I probably wouldn't, because I didn't feel safe to speak out. And that was the top and bottom of it. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel people had my back. And actually that was evidenced throughout that experience.
It's safety is a big thing, isn't it? When you, especially within advocacy, to being safe to be able to say, because it can fall on deaf ears, can it, if you don't sort of.
Or it could be used against you.
Yeah.
And actually there was probably some examples of when that did happen, that it was me speaking out on other matters was then used against me. But I'm better off out of it. I'm doing better stuff now.
Yeah. I love the power of forgiveness and the power of anger as well. I think you can build on that, can't you, to actually turn a negative situation into a positive, and obviously which you've done, taken those lessons forward. But as an EDI activist, which you are, the current global situation kept coming to mind as I was reading this chapter, and I know how frustrated you are at the moment, and there's a few global readers could do with having this book and having a read of it.
Yeah, like I say, not self-aware enough to know.
But you mention in the book, and you've just referenced it there as well, about tick boxing, and you'd call it like a bingo card type approach. And it made me think about the misunderstanding of EDI policies and strategies and the misuse of them. And what your take is on leaders who have taken this bingo card approach, and whether that has actually led to the current situation that we're dealing with the backlash against.
I think there is a degree of that, and I think that people, well, if I'm honest, I think what happened was we thought we'd made some gains, but what we'd actually done is we told people what they're not allowed to talk about, so they didn't talk about it. And then somebody said, oh, you can talk about it now, so they started talking about it again. So I don't think we'd actually achieved what we thought we'd achieved. But I think there's a whole, some of this tick box stuff, and people use policies almost as a weapon sometimes. So they will use them to tell you why they can't do certain things. And actually quite often they're used as weapons against black people or against women or whatever. Instead of people just being humans and sensible and leading with common sense and compassion. Yes, you've got to be guided by policies. Yes, you can't just kind of give this person one thing and somebody else another, but you need to think about who that human is and what they need. That's really, really important. I think that the whole climate at the moment with EDI is it's being used as a scapegoat. It's being used as something that we can blame, because the people who really hold the power feel like they're not covered by it. And they can say, oh, that's for people who are other to you. That's for people who don't look like you, or don't live like you, or don't sound like you. And we can keep the power here if we attack that. But what's really kind of annoying, though, is that for the majority of the people in this world, equity is better. It's better for everyone. And it doesn't matter, sorry, white men in the room, it doesn't matter if you're a white middle-aged man. Equity is better for you. But we're told it's not. And we're told that actually it's harming you in some way and it's taking from you. I'm going to get really political now. It's not them that's taking from you. It's the super wealthy that are taking from people. But it suits the super wealthy to tell you that it's people like me or you or a lot of the people in this room that are taking. So it's just a ploy. It's just a weapon that people are using. And what really saddens me is that so many organisations are capitulating. So many organisations are going, we're scared that we'll lose this deal, or we're scared that we'll be attacked for this reason. So they're backing down, and they're actually leaving people without any protections whatsoever.
Yeah, it's scary times, isn't it? It's having a massive effect, isn't it, on organisations like yourself as well, because it's affecting funding and things. And you hope that leaders actually lead with some common sense and humanity as well behind it. Which moves us on to that last chapter of the book, The Secret Lesson, which sums up, the whole book beautifully, and really it answers the reality of what leadership is and looks like. I won't give too much away about it, but it sums up the book as well, in terms of it being that really friendly, helping, guiding hand that it is, and very unlike other business books on the market. I shared with Steph that I don't do business books. But this was obviously a joy to read, one, because it's little, and two, because, like you say, you share your mistakes, it's built on values of trust, honesty, vulnerability, being imperfect, all the things that we can recognise within ourselves and take forward on our journey too. It's really inclusive and accessible. That's probably my biggest takeaway from it. So obviously, many congratulations. You must be really proud of what you've created. But before we move on to the Q&A, because I'm sure there's lots of people in the room who've got questions to ask you, I've got a good old-fashioned question. Is very experienced Steph, who is now an author of a leadership book. What is the one lesson you would encourage young Steph to embrace?
It's an easy answer. It's that key chapter of You Are Enough. I'm very happy with who I am and where I am. But I think if that kind of 10, 11, 12-year-old Steph had known then that she was enough, I'd probably be running the world by now. It's that kind of... But yeah, if I just believed for 20 odd, 30 years maybe, that I was enough, then I probably would have achieved more and had a bigger impact. But like I say, I possibly wouldn't be who I am now. In fact, I probably wouldn't be who I am now. So I'm not gonna feel bad about the fact that the first time somebody mentioned imposter syndrome to me, I decided I was too busy to possibly address that and put it to one side.
That busyness myth. It's got a lot to answer for. It is. Well done.
Thank you.
It's a great book, and so questions. I'm sure there's lots of questions bubbling throughout that. Anybody got any questions that they would ask Steph?
I had a conversation this evening about tapping into your inner child and letting it go and be free. And I wondered if there was a time when you were younger, where you felt you were enough before you got to
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was kind of pre-pubescent, for want of that's an awful word, pre-pubescent, but when I was young, definitely. I actually talk about, I've got the picture on my phone somewhere, of me as a 2-year-old. I use it in presentations when I'm speaking, and I'm standing, and I'm there. I've got a pair of yellow trousers on, big red patches. My hair's up in the kind of like a messy bun type thing. I'm standing in my granddad's back garden, and I'm literally standing like this. Which people have told me I still do now. And yeah, I mean, I thought at that point I could conquer the world. You know, I can remember being away on a brownie pack holiday and putting a pinny around my waist and doing the Breton Fisherman's dance, which was a ballet dance in front of everybody, because I just thought I was amazing. And I was, because kids are. So yeah, definitely. And I think I'm more like 2-year-old Steph now than I was through a large part of my adulthood. And some of that will be age, and you know, it's like I really don't care anymore, but actually a lot of it is because of the work I've done on taming imposter phenomena, that I just kind of go, that young girl was great. And I've spoken to people who knew me as a teenager when I felt like I was on the outskirts, and they tell me I was right in the centre. And I just didn't feel any of that. So, yeah, definitely when I was up until about, I think probably about the age of 10, 11, interestingly, as I went into secondary school, I think that's when things flipped.
You talk a lot about your mentoring and coaching for young leaders, young female leaders coming in. What's your advice for older leaders that are perhaps coming back into a second stage of their career? What advice would you give in terms of how you remember how good you once were?
Yeah, well, I think it is that you need. I had to look for evidence of what I had achieved, and there's so many things that you get that you just dismiss. So there's those little emails, those words of thanks, the you know, somebody puts your name on something, all of that type of stuff. When you're in that kind of imposter phenomena phase, you just disregard all of that. You need to seek that stuff out and kind of go, I did that, not we did that, actually, because it's the opposite. It's I did that, and I led that, and I created that climate and all of that, and you need to kind of build that up. But I would say the most important thing when you're looking at moving into new careers or whatever is think about what really, really matters. So what are your values? What do you really care about? What do you want to do? Who do you want to be surrounded with? And when I say what do you want to do, I don't mean like what job title do you want, but actually what do you want to be doing on a daily basis? What is it that really energizes you? All of that type of thing. You know, I'm not saying we don't have tough days at St. Oswald's, but actually genuinely, I'm excited when I think about all the stuff that we're doing at St. Oswald's. There's so much variety there for me. It's the right place and the right role for me. So really thinking about that, and I would say don't focus on job titles, because I did for a period, and it made me do some jobs where it was like, really? And part of that was because in the NHS a job title is really, really important. But yeah, don't think about the job title. Think about what is it you want to do and who do you want to be at work. And like I say, importantly, who do you want to be surrounded with? I quite often say to people, think, who do I want to work with? And then work out how you can work with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Who would you like most to leave this book?
Your daughter. Both of them, but no. No, it's really hard question, actually. Because I would, so Waz's daughter, I mean, we've connected in so many different ways, but both of his daughters have been guides of mine, and the eldest is now 18, which is like crazy. So yeah, absolutely, 18-year-olds who are just stepping off into work or uni or whatever, I would like them to read it. But I think it's anybody who's ever doubted themselves. It's anybody who's ever looked at leaders and thought, do I have to be like that? Because I used to do that a lot. I used to go into like, oh, right, I want to be a director. And I'd go, and then I'd meet directors and I'd go, really? I don't want to do that. But I have to be that way because that's the way that directors obviously are. So anybody who's ever questioned that type of thing. anybody who's ever just been a bit confused by what's going on around them, because I've spent a lot of time kind of trying to work out why certain things happened, and that's in the book. So anybody really, but particularly people who are questioning, people who feel lost, or people who are starting out, people who are making a change, women, black and minoritized people, you know, people with disabilities, LGBT community, because I think we all have that experience of being othered, and particularly 50-year-old white men who are willing to be open and learn some stuff, because I think I genuinely think that the world isn't good to you either.
I've got
Just
to
you may
say,
not recognise it yet.
when I read it, my immediate thought of who needs to read this in my own household was my 17-year-old son. You know, the relevance of what young boys, especially at the moment, are being told, and actually the lessons that are in that book are very much needed. You know, so I think it is open to everybody from the point of view of if you want to learn.
And I would hope it's an easy read as well. So, sorry, Steph, I left a bit in about the toilet. Yeah, I did.
I thought you would.
Yeah, you see, I did wrangle. So Steph, there's a bit about reading it on the loo, and Steph said no, but it's me. So I left it in. But actually, the whole idea is that it's designed to be. You can read a chapter when you have a few moments peace in the smallest room. But you don't have to read it from start to finish. You can just dip in and out of it. So that's the whole idea of, didn't want a book where people thought, oh God, it's a right tome and I've got to get through it. I want something that is accessible and that people can just go, right, I want to know about this. What can I find out about it? So.
And the end of each chapter is brilliant. The lessons are really succinct in them, so you can literally on the hop be like, what was it? If you wanted to double check something, you don't need to read the whole chapter again. Steph has kindly condensed those lessons into little snippets as well.
Thank you to my beta readers for that suggestion.
You talked about people it being sort of aimed at people, you'd like people who have ever doubted themselves. What about those who've never doubted themselves? So I think we've talked a bit about in this room tonight, and like obviously I think you're among a like-minded audience, but it's the people that have never doubted that I think this sort of book needs to reach the hardest.
I don't know that anybody's never doubted themselves. I think they I think that sometimes what we think of as being somebody who's super confident is actually not at all. It's that kind of, you know, it's that bravado that people put out there. But yeah, I think there's a certain type of leader that I would love to read it and to go, oh, okay, I know now why I got that reaction. Or, oh, yeah, maybe I could have done that better. I'm not convinced they would have that reaction. But I would love that to happen. And I know, Yasmin, when we were thinking about the cover of the book, and there was this whole thing about, do I want to be on the front cover of the book, and would it put people off, and all that type of thing. And Yasmin said, well, you know what, ma'am, if they're the type of people that are going to be put off because you're on the front cover of the book, they're not the type of person to read the book. And actually, that's the truth. Some people will just look at that, or they'll see my surname, and they'll go, it's not for me. Or they'll kind of have a quick flick through, and they'll go, nah, it's not for me. And unfortunately, they're probably right, because they'll get nothing from it at all. But if they're open, then yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I've got two questions for you today. What was the biggest challenge that you faced writing the book? And the second one is, what was the first feeling when you woke up this morning?
Okay. The first feeling was, where's my cup of tea? No. Okay, so the biggest challenge actually wasn't in the writing. It was after it was written and it went off to the editor. And I got the comments back from the editor. And as Rob and Yasmin will kind of witness, I was a bit shouty, wasn't I? I was going through, I was like, what? How do I do? Not now. But actually it was partly because some of it was fine. But there were some things that I've been really purposeful about in that book. So I don't talk about imposter syndrome. I talk about imposter phenomena. And that's on purpose. And it's because I saw a video by John Amici who said, this is not, it's not an illness, it's an experience. And the editor suggested that I change it to, I mean, the editor's always suggestions. I had to keep reminding myself that, but they suggested that I changed it to syndrome. And then they suggested that I talk with people, I don't talk to people. And again, that was something that I consciously changed my language when I was at Health Watch about, actually it's a conversation, I'm not talking to you. So I use talk with, and they changed it to talk to. So it was stuff like that that I found actually was really, really challenging and difficult. And I don't like having my homework corrected. So yeah, so that was really, really tough. This morning, I was actually really peaceful this morning when I woke up. I've said to a few people, I've been through every single emotion today possible. I've been excited, I've been nervous, I've been quite emotional and weepy. I've been really chilled and zen. It's just been, and it's literally gone like from one to the other. I got in the car to leave here earlier today and got quite emotional. But yeah, when I woke up this morning, I was really kind of like, and I think part of it was because I'd done everything that I could do. And finally, it was going to be released on the world, unleashed on the world. So yeah, quite relaxed first thing, and then it changed.
Congratulations again, Steph.
Thanks.
So we all know that one of the greatest qualities of leaders is being authentic and, you know, being true to yourself. And, you know, I absolutely know you've worked with you and I know you're absolutely authentic. But have there been times where you maybe had to compromise and, you know, not be your true self, depending on, you know, meetings or situations?
Through most of my time at the NHS. And I, you know, I do love the NHS, so I'm not bashing it, but yeah, pretty much I was trying to be somebody that I thought I needed to be. I joined the ambulance service, and when I applied for the job, I looked, because I've been told this is what you look at what the top team look like, and you try to make yourself look as much like them. So I was applying for an assistant director role, so I'd be reporting into directors. So I went on the website and I looked, and at the time, the ambulance service, the directors were all the kind of white men in their 50s. And they all had white shirts on and ties and grey suits. So I have a photo of myself, which is a horrendous photo, and I found the actual thing from the newspaper the other day, and it's huge, of me trying to be a middle-aged white man. And my hair was straight, because I used to wear my hair straight all the time. I had virtually no makeup on, I wore no jewellery, I used to wear virtually no colour at all. I always wore trouser suits. I was constantly trying, and that was kind of like almost like a costume I put on, but then my behaviour was like that, but I'm not very good at it. So I would kind of try my best to be a certain mould of person, and then would mess it up. And I couldn't be that person. I'm not good enough at pretending to be that person. My mum will tell you I'm not a very good liar. I got caught out all the time as a kid. So yeah, it just was really, really difficult for me. So I'd kind of fall out of character. And looking back, actually, it was when I fell out of character that I really achieved things. So, you know, I still have people from my time in the ambulance service who I'm in touch with and speak fondly of me and vice versa and things, because I was that. I fell out of character. I couldn't be this strange person. So.
I think I remember exactly what picture you took.
Yeah, it is horrible, isn't it?
I've been really lax and left my phone in my bag. Could we time check?
It's 22, so yeah, I probably need to. Should we take one more? Because I've seen goals. He's put a hand up.
Sorry, I just put my hand up because it was kind of full up from that. And by the way, Steph, I don't know if I've told you, you're an amazing woman and you're very inspiring.
Thank you.
I just thought I'd say that first. But the reason that it's a follow-up question to her question, because I like the way you talked about leading from a very human-centered approach, and that kind of tells me that you let your personality shine through and that you listen to people, like you said, not just talking about policies. But basically, where you are now, have you ever been in situations where obviously when you're leading from that approach and then you see people that have led in a different way, like directors, this is how you're supposed to be, and then you get challenged, like how do you approach those kind of situations? Like how do you, because in that light you're kind of teaching people to lead a different way, like soft leadership, but how do you challenge these kind of situations?
It's easier now because I'm the boss. And I will say I've got colleagues here. I don't get it right all the time. In fact, I get it wrong quite a lot. I think because I have the confidence that I wish I had in the past, I'm happy to question a bit more and to challenge more than I used to. We've got an interesting insect flying around up there. But I think sometimes there's something about, okay, so is this worth it? Because you've got a certain amount of capital almost that you can use, and is this the thing I'm going to use that capital on or not? But if it's worth it, I will absolutely question and challenge. As I say, it happened quite recently when I challenged something, and it was easier because there were more of us of a like mind there that I knew would back it up. But yeah, I would say pick your battles, because you can't fight everything. Nobody has the energy for that, and nobody has the capital for that. So really pick your battles and be really clear about what it is that you're questioning. I think one of the things I tend to do is the team will probably go, no, it's not you. But I quite often will say stuff, but I say it as almost like, here's an idea, what do you think? And then somebody will go, well, no, actually, that's no good because of X, Y, and Z. And I'll kind of go, and I'm quite happy in those circumstances back down. If I've said it differently and no, this is absolutely what I think we should do, that's when I'll defend it. But yeah, I would say really be careful about, and mindful rather than careful about the things that you choose to challenge. And I would say that with not just with kind of directors and senior people, I would say with everything, going back to the whole EDI thing, really think about what you're going to challenge and when, and again, how that affects your own personal energy. I was talking to somebody yesterday at an event, and she's exhausted. She's absolutely exhausted. And I said, yeah, but you can take a break because we're here and we can step forward, and then I can take a break because I know you'll step forward. So really being careful about yourself and your own energy and your own resilience is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Steph, for your kindness, your vulnerability, sharing the lessons that you've learned. And a last plug for the book. Because I believe if you buy it today and tomorrow... If you buy it today or tomorrow online, it is up to 50% off. You will get some freebies, and all of the profits are going to St Oswald's Hospice. By Thursday, gone. You'll have to pay full whack. So yeah, get it. So there's QR code. There's a QR code, and there's gift bags as well, and there's info in there on how to buy. But yeah, please buy the book. It would be a shame if nobody bought it. So great, thank you. Thank you so much, Steph.